Hi, and welcome to Benny Moo. My name's Benjamin Day. This is the first installment of the podcast on this blog. Thanks for tuning in. I want to talk today about H.R. 3221. This was the housing reform bill that passed 2 weeks ago and was signed into law in the first week of August. It was a ballyhooed measure passed by bipartisan support on both sides with a supermajority. That's why it was signed into law. And some of the things that came out of it were supposed to change up the real estate business for the better, make it easier to buy homes, make it easier to sell homes, get the economy moving. After all, this recession that we're in is in large measure due to weaknesses in the housing market. Well, the reality is H.R. 3221 complicates things even further and doesn't change a heck of a lot. What I'll be talking about today are what hasn't changed, what has changed, some of the taxable implications that are out there, and what to do with H.R. 3221. First, what hasn't changed with H.R. 3221. It takes cash to buy property in Colorado and anywhere. H.R. 3221 changed two places notably. FHA finances are now at 3.5% for down payment if you do an FHA loan. If you do a jumbo loan, that measure has been permanently increased to over $600,000, which sounds like a good deal, but that's only a good deal if you live in one of the more expensive marketplaces in the United States, such as San Francisco or Boston. In Colorado, where I work, the jumbo law hasn't changed at all, and so loans are still at 8.5% interest if they're at $417,000 and a buck. And if you're wondering why there's 30 months of inventory over $600,000 in Colorado Springs, we tend to use loans to buy houses here in Colorado Springs, even the high-end ones. And when people don't have the ability to affordably leverage their cash, they don't buy. And so the changes that came out of H.R. 3221 that were even published in the Southern Colorado Economic Forum by Fred Crowley at UCCS, that we would see a positive impact from the change in the jumbo finance reform, those changes affect marketplaces with a much higher median price range than Colorado Springs. So there's no impact here in Colorado Springs from this bill. Secondly, it does make things a little easier to get in with an FHA loan, and you're going to start to see a lot of people buying homes with FHAs. But in the FHA, it's now risk-based pricing. So if you have a less than 700 credit score, expect to pay more interest. Expect to pay a larger mortgage insurance premium now also. It also takes 3.5% and not 3% to get into an FHA loan, and down payment assistance, which has always been a little interesting, but that little 0% companion loan, those are gone also. I'm over here now. My first experiment, excuse the editing. Those companion loans that I was talking about with the down payment assistance programs, those are gone, but in their place is a loan program through the United States government. They're not calling it a loan program, they're calling it a tax credit, but it's a loan. It's a 0% loan up to $7,500, and you can claim it on your 2008 tax return. You just have to make a purchase by the end of June 2009. It's funny, some of the emails I've been receiving from lenders out there just showing that the lending practices are still at their craziest. They're encouraging individuals to increase all of their dependents and to hold back on as much money as they possibly can, to squeeze every inch out of this for the short term that they possibly can to get money from the government on this tax loan that they're actually offering. The reality of it is it's a 0% loan and you have to pay it back. And so if you take $7,500 from the government, they expect to get back $7,500, even at 0% interest, the government's favorite form of interest, 0%. You have to pay it back at least $500 a year over the next 15 years. So if you take this $7,500, just understand you have to put this on your tax return for the next 15 years until it is actually paid off. If you're interested in doing that, by all means, go right ahead. If you're thinking, it sounds a little odd, you're probably thinking correctly. I also want to talk today about rental properties. It's a great time to be an investor in Colorado Springs. Multifamily dwellings have a less than 10% vacancy rate at 9% right now, and if you own a single-family residence, it's easier now than it's been in probably half a decade to get that property rented. We still have people relocating in droves to Colorado Springs, but they're not purchasing, they're renting. So we're starting to see rental prices go up. If you wanted to buy a rental property, you could do so in the northeastern part of town and get into a 4-bedroom, 3-bath property that would be able to rent for between $1,200 and $1,350 a month. You'd be cash flowing on that property if you had about 25% down on a 30-year fixed mortgage. So that's a pretty outstanding measure of return in this marketplace and to build some really good long-term wealth. Now, where it gets interesting with H.R. 3221 is if you wanted to convert your primary residence now into a rental property and make a move-up purchase. I've got a client right now doing that, and I've got 2 sellers who are considering doing that with their listings right now, renting out the properties and selling them at a time that would be better suited to their needs. Well, effective January 1st, 2009 starts non-qualified time for ownership versus primary residence. It used to be if you lived in that house for 2 years and a day, you could have up to $250,000 in non-taxable gain if you were a single person, and $500,000 if you were a married couple. So you could have almost 3 years worth of non-primary resident ownership of a property, a second home, an investment home, any of that, and you wouldn't have to pay taxes on it. Well, that changes effective January 1st, 2009, and it moves on to a ratio schedule. So if you like math, you'll love this one. It moves on to a percentage of time that's called qualified time versus non-qualified time. So if you bought the house in 2003, January 1st, 2003, lived in it every day until December 31st, 2008 for 5 years. And then effective January 1st, 2009, you made it a rental property for 1 year. Well, 1/6 of that time would be non-qualified time, and 5/6 of that time would be qualified time. So about 16% of your gain, say it's $250,000, would be non-qualified gain, and that would be subject to capital gains. Capital gains have been reduced under the present administration to about 15%. My guess is, whether it's Obama or McCain who gets into the White House, capital gains go up to 20% sometime in 2009. And so that you're going to start to see a capital gains aspect to real estate that just hasn't been there for over a decade. That old rule passed in 1997. And it looked like 2 years ago it was actually going to have an increase because of the gains that were there. And instead, H.R. 3221 steps in and creates a ratio schedule for the taxable percentage that you may qualify for or not qualify for in terms of gain and what is taxable. In conclusion, right now the marketplace is not really benefited by H.R. 3221. This is a legislation that does something to, frankly, annoy just about everyone. It's not an all-purpose document. It doesn't make housing any easier to purchase. It certainly doesn't make housing any easier to sell. But what it does do is change up some of the laws, and you can see that the government is going to be playing a hand in real estate for years to come because of some of the major problems that have resulted from the housing meltdown of the last year and a half. Because of those changes, Congress has stepped in and they've given the IRS the responsibility of enforcing most of these rules. HUD will have a place to play in this as well. Best thing to do would be to stay tuned. If you're out there looking, buy smart, buy intelligent, buy with the facts. This has been Benny Moo. Take care.